Hello, and welcome to the Pilot Podcast, where we talk with people who have taken some unique paths and have some inspiring stories to tell us. My name is Helga, and I'm a third-year student at Kaospilot. And today I'm sitting with Hildur Maral. Welcome, Hildur.
Thank you.
You
Hi.
say that you work in music.
Yes,
Um,
this is correct.
yeah, that's a very broad term, but I also know that you've been around in the music industry quite a lot. Is that right?
Yeah, I think it's 19 years this year.
Wow, that's a long.
So for like the majority of my life, pretty much.
And can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Who's Hildur?
Good question. Icelandic Iranian,
Mm.
grown up in Iceland and then moved to Aarhus in 2013 to study at the Kaospilot. And yeah, then realized after a couple of months that Denmark felt like a better, bigger version of Iceland in every way. So my plans to go back home derailed, and I basically did not. So I've been living in Denmark and yeah, on and off since then. Also lived in Spain and London for work stuff, studies. Yeah, I work in music and I live in Vesterbro in Copenhagen. I think that's mainly
That's,
it.
yeah. So you've been around and now you're back in Denmark.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. And yeah, what about your early years? Have you always had an interest in music? How did you yeah, get into the music industry?
I mean, I don't know if it was the same for you, but Iceland is quite well known for spending a lot of effort and energy into like music education. So it's very common for a lot of people to go through music education as a child, or at least their friends, or the family will have gone through it. So I come from a family that's very musical, and I myself started studying the flute when I was 5 years old, and was in brass band and all of that. And then didn't necessarily know I wanted to work in it, but I was always, singing and listening to a lot of music. Classical music was kind of what I was brought up on in my home. And yeah, then typical teenage behavior, you get into more like rock music, indie stuff, and I just became a little bit obsessed, and I don't think it has stopped.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like it has, at least.
No.
Yeah, I recognize the same as quite common that all the kids in Iceland go to music school and pick an instrument. At least more common than many other places in the world, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. And then at 14, you have your own radio show, or like you're a radio host in the Icelandic broadcasting channel. How did that come to happen?
Honestly, I think I just saw that they were looking for people. And what I think they did really well was that they realized that if they want to hit like a teen segment, it probably makes more sense for the show hosts to know kind of the environment that teens are living in. So they realized actually we should be getting like teenage radio hosts for this. And I'd never done that before, but my mom was working there. And so I'd been kind of around the building a lot, and I'd been um, like acting in radio plays as a voice actor when I was younger. And I always liked that. Like I liked the kind of concept of radio, and it was very omnipresent in my childhood. So I was just like, yeah, I can probably do this. Why not? And I think I just applied and had a test or something, and then I did that for 4 years.
Wow. That's also a long time you had it.
Yeah, I mean, it changed quite a bunch in that time frame. New hosts came in and we changed, the focus areas. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. Like to this day, probably one of the more fun jobs I've had.
Yeah, it sounds very fun and a fun way to maybe get into the industry and talk to artists and bands and musicians.
Exactly. And it's such a nice way to get to know people. And
Mm.
then, once I wanted to work more in music and maybe go into festivals or something, I already had interviewed so many people, and they kind of knew that I was, even though I was young, they knew I was passionate about what I was doing, and we'd met before, so it was like an easier way to get my foot in, so to say.
Mm. And that's also what happens next is that you go and you yeah, set up festivals and are working more with that, right?
Yeah, I got kind of heavily into the festival scene in Iceland, and Iceland is interesting in many ways because it's so creative. And at the same time, it's a small island in the Atlantic Ocean. There's not that much to do, definitely not back then, 2004, 5. So if you wanna do something fun, oftentimes you just have to create it yourself. So that was like the first time I was experimenting a bit with like my entrepreneurship, and the mentality in Iceland is also very much like, yeah, you can just do it, it'll be fine. So you do something once and nothing bad happens, no one dies, and it's kind of fun, and then you just do more. And I really like this mentality about that place. Like there's other things that are not great about Iceland, but this is
Mhm.
definitely one of them.
Yeah, yeah. There's pros and cons to all places.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. And then you are also a Kaospilot alumni. And I don't know in the timeline of your life, like how long you stay in Iceland, but at some point you moved to Denmark, you say, because Iceland was too small.
Yeah, I think I remember very vividly, like the moment I decided I should do it. I knew some people, like other alumni that had gone there, and I'd worked with a few chaos pilots, and I just could tell that there's something here that I'm interested in. Like I couldn't quite put my finger on it.
Mm.
Um, and then I realized like I was in my like an amazing job, like one of the best jobs I've ever had. And I was working in a recording studio as a label manager, and there was just this like influx of amazing artists coming and going, and it was very creative. And I remember thinking to myself, I could probably do this forever, and
Mhm.
that scared me a lot, because then I was like, I'm 23, I've only ever lived in Iceland. Now I have a job where I can feel like I could really just be very comfortable doing this for a long time because it's really amazing. But at the same time, maybe I should be kind of pushing myself and trying new things. And if I do want to move abroad, like the time is probably now.
Yeah.
So that's when I'd known about the education for a few years, and that's the moment where I kind of felt like now is the time to jump.
Mm. So you moved to Denmark and is based more of this feeling that the people you've been working with, they have something in common that you also want to learn. Is that right?
Yeah, it was just this feeling, like really hard to point out. It
Yeah.
was also before the school had a functioning website, so you know, going online was not very helpful. And
No.
even when I went to the application workshop, I did not quite understand.
Mm,
I think it took me like 2 weeks of being in the school, and I was like, this is what I signed up for.
yeah.
But
It's
when you just have a gut feeling that something is the right stuff for you, that was what happened with me.
yeah. I had the exact same experience myself, and I had also met some cast pilots and had the same gut feeling about there's something here that I'm very curious about, and it also took me a few weeks of being in the school to like we really get it.
Yeah, I think that's a common theme.
Yeah. And then after cast pilot, you also have a very like extensive list of experiences, and you've really been I think looking at your like list of experiences, you have really been around and tried a lot of different things in working with music and in the music industry.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of reasons for it. I mean, like working in music is not the most predictable job. It's not a very
Mhm.
9 to 5 office thing that people just do for decades in the same place. So just in its essence, there is a lot of moving around, and especially with me, because I've worked in music for a long time, but it's not like I found something within the industry and that was what I was going to do. So I worked a lot with like record labels. Then I've also done a lot of festivals and a bunch of other things. And for the longest time, I felt like I need to find what is the main thing for me. But then maybe
Mm.
after a year of doing that, I missed the other thing. So there was a lot of like testing out different things, and yeah, just enjoying the process, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and it's also a very multifaceted industry in that way. You can work as a label manager or as a artist manager, but you can also be an artist or work more creatively with it, and there's everything in between, I guess.
Yeah. And it is hard to find a job that actually pays like 100% job in the music industry, even if you have the experience. even if you study, like this market is very, very difficult, as with other creative industries. So I think it's quite normal for people in the creative industries to kind of find their groove through trying a bunch of different things. And it's all about the network in the end, you know. Maybe
Yeah.
you meet someone in Aarhus that later ends up giving you a job maybe 10 years later,
Yeah.
like in the case, you know. So it's always about kind of being open to something, and it might not come right away, but maybe it comes when you least expect it.
Yeah. That's often how it works. And could you tell us a little about, yeah, a little bit about the different things you worked with? Because it's a lot of different things. Like maybe some of the things that have stood out for you.
Ah, that's a really hard question. I think like the projects that have left the biggest impact on me
Hmm.
have usually been projects that have like a bigger impact.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's obviously something that we also have in Kaospilot is, you know, you think about those things and like the values of the companies you're working with. But I think when you're doing something for the greater good and you can really see it impacting people, that of course leaves an impression. Uh,
Mm.
But I think, yeah, I mean, that particular project I'm thinking about now is one that I did with Africa Burn Festival when we did
Yeah.
our outpost semester in Cape Town. And that was like an outreach program for people that actually live where the festival is held. And that actually showed me a lot. I learned so much from that, also about what kind of projects I want to do.
Mm.
But then equally, I mean, music can also be a healing force. So when you feel like the world is very bleak, and sometimes I think we all have this moment like, I'm just doing this 9 to 5 job, and you know, am I helping someone? Am I being of service to, you know, the greater good?
Yeah.
But I actually believe that you know, if I have a hand in either bringing people together in a space where you kind of have this collective healing of listening to beautiful music and really being in the moment with your community, or you know, having a hand in that music being available for people to stream and listen to on vinyl and all of this, I
Mm.
also think that's contributing in some way.
Yeah. Do you feel like people who work in the music industry realize the power that music can have? Yeah, are they aware of the power that their work can?
I think most people must be, because what's really quite common in this industry, because it is so difficult, and you know, it is it is hard to not have those frames around like work-life balance. You know, you're out late at night at a gig, and then you know, have a after party, and then you go on tour, and it's just very blurred, like those lines.
Yeah.
So I think people that get into it are there for the right reasons, which in this case is like passion. They are passionate about it, so they themselves will have felt at some point the power of music on their own skin, you know. At least I haven't really met anyone that just ended up in the music industry and doesn't really care about music. So I think people know. But then, of course, what happens with anything where people kind of don't push themselves, or it's not the right fit for them in their job, you know, maybe they become a bit jaded and they lose that magical feeling. And it's something you have to remind yourself of. I mean, definitely I've lost that spark a few times, and even wondered whether I should still be working in music, but I
Mm.
always keep coming back to it. But sometimes you need a little break.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you do when you hit those spots? Is there something that you found out that helps in like reigniting the spark?
I don't know. I think, I mean, for me, it was a weird one, because the moment where I felt like it was actually getting a little too much and I wasn't really feeling the passionate feelings anymore was during COVID. And, you know, that was a weird time for everyone.
Yeah.
But what that meant for me was that my life before that, I was living in London, I was working with Universal, and I was basically going to shows like every day.
Wow.
And you know, it was a lot of fun. It was also exhausting. And then you would still do like 9 to 5 and go to another gig, and then going from that to going to COVID in Iceland for a year and a half without kind of any big shows or anything like this.
Mm.
And I started to really miss it. And then of course you realize the balance is somewhere in between. Like you probably shouldn't be going to gigs every night, because then it becomes really like a work thing instead of being something you want to do.
Yeah.
Um, and then probably it's not healthy for someone like me who loves live music to not see a show for a year and a half. But maybe
Mm.
twice a month. So I started to kind of
Yeah.
experiment a little bit with, what that balance meant to me. And I kind of cracked the code, but it's very individualistic. Like for me, that's a very clear example. For others, it might look completely different.
Yeah, definitely. And you have also been working a lot as a label manager, I've seen. And then you ended up founding your own label with a friend, right?
Yeah.
Eh,
So
yeah.
my current job is I am managing director for a company called OPIA, and I'm also part of Oliver Arnald's management team. He's an Icelandic artist, pianist, and electronic artist. And so we founded OPIA together. He had started it up in 2019, and it was meant to become a bigger thing. And then again, the pandemic happened. So everything was just kind of put on pause, and the team also realized they probably needed someone to run this.
Mm.
So when we started talking, I used to work with him in my role in Universal, on the label side with his label. And after that, we started talking, and I was like, this is kind of perfect for me because what we do with OPI is we're a record label, yes, but we also do 2 big festivals a year in different locations, and then we do a bunch of community projects. So for me, like having always a hard time, the grass is always greener, this type of mentality, it was kind of perfect because then now I'm doing like both those things.
Yeah.
And it's never boring and it's always something different, like no day look the same.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, so it's like his brainchild, and then I came on board to help form it into reality with three of our other colleagues. And right now it's like today, actually, when we're speaking now, 18th of October,
Yeah.
it's exactly a year since we did our launch event in Berlin. So
Okay.
I've just been reflecting today because we've done so much since, and it's hard for me to imagine it's only been a year. It just feels like a lifetime of amazing, amazing times. And yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Where did the idea spark from, like launching or founding OPIA and launching their community like that?
So that came from Oliver. He's been in the scene for a really long time, and that's kind of the scene where modern classical music meets electronic music,
Mm.
which is a very active scene, but it's been kind of lacking in like a common place to meet, or I don't know, it's always kind of just been on the outskirts, and like the community around him and around the scene um, is like very loving, very creative, really amazing people. And actually, again, not that I want to keep talking about COVID, but it was the pandemic that they started to kind of meet up online on Discord, which is kind of, yeah,
Wow.
this board for people that don't know, like a server, where people can actually have conversations. So as opposed to other social media where you're speaking at someone on Instagram and the only thing you can do is like or reply to a comment and that's it. Here people have like different channels and you can go really in depth on just, yeah, forming a little community. And so that's
Mm.
what started happening. And then, yeah, his idea was that he also wanted to create spaces where people could meet in real life. So it's amazing to have places like Discord, these online communities, but also to extend them into actual human connection, because that's in the end the main thing. Like the reason why we do anything, I guess, is just like in hopes of connecting, at least in the creative industries.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so that was kind of the thought behind it.
Mm. And is the community, is the intention of it to gather people from the music industry or musicians of such, or is it also for the audience, or how is it that?
It's 100% for everyone that feels a kinship. I mean, there's a lot of musicians there, but it's not a music industry thing. It is art lovers, it's artists, it's thinkers, dreamers, painters, filmmakers, just people that like to listen to music, people like to go on nature walks, anything. So obviously it's born from like this particular music scene, but it's become so much bigger than that. And it's been really amazing. Like when we do our festivals, like we just did one in June in Utrecht,
Yeah.
and that was amazing. It was sold out 2,000 people, and we've created a festival and curated that, and that's where my focus was on that day. But the community was meeting up like before, during, after, doing a whole bunch of different things. They were playing the piano like in the space. They were having their artwork hung up at the festival. They were having like picnic outside and brunch the following morning. And just it's about connecting to people, and
Mm.
I guess connecting through creative initiatives.
Yeah, sounds very beautiful. It's almost sounds a little utopian. I guess when I think of like the utopian future of the music industry, that's kind of what I would think of. That people were connecting a lot around music, and it would be even more opened opened up somehow.
But that's exactly what we hope to do. And also what we're doing is we don't hold all the answers. So a lot of times like community members will come with an idea, and if I can help make that happen, then I will. For example, someone asked on our Discord server, hey, we should have an OPIA magazine. And we said, okay, if you can get a group together and make it. And they just had a Zoom meeting, like 9 strangers that had never met each other from India, Australia, like all over the globe. And they actually made a magazine, and then we just printed it, and distributed it for free at our last festival. And holding that, it was such a beautiful feeling, because this was just someone's dream, and it was
Mm.
just people coming together to make it happen and enriching people's lives while reading it. It's such a nice thing.
Yeah. Sounds yeah, it just sounds very beautiful. Must also give a lot back doing this work and then experiencing how the community comes together.
I think so. I mean, especially like the world now, it's so divided, and it's bleak at times. And I
Mm.
think it's very important to try and hone in on like actual human relationships and help nurture these communities. And people sometimes ask, because also in the music industry, like this is, of course, a commodity. Like if you're able to maintain a big community, there's a lot you could do with that to
Mm.
capitalize on it. But so people sometimes ask me, like, what is the plan with that? And how did you create this? And it's like, well, you can't really create something like this. It happens organically, and you can help like elevate it, nurture it, and be there for it. But like as soon as we would start to think about it in those terms, the whole idea would collapse. It's
Mm.
not about that. And I think that's what a lot of people don't understand, and that's why it doesn't work for them when they try.
Mm. Because they don't understand how you can do something that's not in with the intention of capitalize them.
Yeah, and that's of course like it's always a business. It's a music business, right? And so it's
Yeah,
valid to think like that. And to some extent we also have to like think of ourselves as a business. But
of
I
course.
just think when that's your focal point, then everything else is kind of lost.
Mm. Yeah, that makes sense. Moving to something maybe a little different. Um, I'm thinking about now when you've worked with so many different facets of the music industry and been around like you have. And sometimes the music industry has doesn't always have the best, what should you call it? Doesn't always have the best reputation maybe of an industry to work with as for like working conditions and so on. So maybe I'm a little curious to hear what has been your experience like working with music, and yeah, maybe just if we start there.
Um, I mean, obviously it's been great because I'm still doing it,
Mm.
but I think it is important to always reevaluate, like, is it still something I want to be doing? And the reality is that like burnout rate is very high in this industry, and it's very fast paced. It is very stressful. Everything in terms of technology just means that it changes so much. And I know that's the case for other industries as well, but we've just seen like historically with this industry, with Napster, with like the fall of physical retail, and then streaming, and then of course all the debate about streaming platforms not paying enough royalties. And now with AI, it's just kind of like there's always these challenges. So I think it's fascinating and it's exciting, but it can also be a lot. And you have to take care of yourself. You have to establish some kind of, work-life balance, especially if you are doing a lot of live events. There's a lot of also for artists, who are the reason why we do this, like artists going on tour is very, very mentally challenging. There's a lot of initiatives trying to help them cope with that.
Yeah.
Um, because you're on the road multiple weeks out of the year and you don't see your family, and every night there's like a party backstage and there's so much like alcohol involved, and it's just a lot. It's not like a normal job by any means. um and then of course for me, like because I started so young and I am a woman, it's not great to be a young woman working in music, as I'm sure you can imagine.
Yeah, it also has the reputation of being very male dominated, and it probably is also most places.
Yeah, it is very much that. And I see it changing, but it's changing a little too slow for me. But we are getting there. But there's initiatives also these days that are helping with that balance, both with putting more women on stage and also backstage. And I think this is really hard because this problem needs to start way earlier. It's like music education and helping, you know, helping people take their first steps and kind of encouraging them. And so I think we have unfortunately a long way to go still, but yeah, we're
Feel
getting
like
there.
yeah. Do you feel like you see more and more initiatives rising, like these past few years, for both for like what do you say to respond to these challenges, for example, to the bad mental health within the industry and to being a woman working in the industry, or yeah, or is it maybe just that it always fluctuates? There's always some initiatives and then it changes what the focal points of them are. Does
I
it make
mean, there's always initiatives.
sense?
I don't remember them as well as when I was starting, but it might have just also been that I wasn't thinking about it as much.
Mm,
It is something that is very like close to my heart now, and being in a leadership role, I also, try my best to give people opportunities that maybe would be easy to overlook or something. So I have a responsibility as well now to really like walk the walk, which is great. But I think, yeah, I mean, there are a few initiatives that have stuck around and really like have changed things, like keychains, for example. I don't know if you are familiar with them, but um, they have this thing called the Keychains Pledge, which is just one part of what they do. But for example, they take that to like festivals and bookers around the world,
mm,
um, and they ask them to sign a pledge that the gender split is going to be 50-50.
ah,
It's, encouraging gender equality in the lineups, because that is the most kind of visible part of, if you go to a music festival and you see mostly white males
yeah.
performing, um, you're really gonna notice if you go to a festival and it's not that.
Mm,
But it is a bit tricky for people to say yes to this, and it took some years for like some of the bigger festivals to agree to it, because then there's always a conversation around, people don't want to pick someone just because of their gender, which of course should not happen. So it's about curational processes and kind of rethinking how you go about that. And yes, maybe it means that you as an A&R scout need to go to other places to look for talent that you hadn't done before, because in the end, we all have a responsibility in this industry.
mm,
So I've really seen like that has grown a lot. I was part of the first time they did it, and that was like 5 or 6 years ago. And now, the list of people, organizations and festivals and so on that have signed this pledge is really, really long. So they are basically saying like we will be held responsible to doing our part, which I think is great.
mm. Yeah, that sounds impactful also. Getting the bigger maybe inspire. Yeah, the getting the bigger labels and the bigger businesses to do that inspires also the industry to follow along.
Yeah.
Yeah. What is yeah, if you could change one thing, if you had the power to change one thing about the industry, what would you change?
Hmm. Oh, I don't know.
it's hard to pick maybe also in that case.
Yeah, nothing like jumps at me. I think just what we've discussed is like an ongoing struggle
Mm,
that, you know, as I said, like changes are happening, but I think it is a little too slow. I think people are
yeah,
still very scared. And unfortunately, I still think people see it as a kind of woke thing to do as opposed to just wanting to be part of like a better future for this industry.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean, again, this is the case for more industries where like money is the leading focus and not everyone cares all that much about other factors.
yeah.
It's just strange to me because like it's so obvious to me that the more like diverse lineup or company or whatever, the better the result because you have different mindsets and you have people speaking different stories from all over the world and different experiences and if the majority in the room is just very monogamous then you're losing something.
Mm, yeah. Now, at OPIA, are you like in somewhat of a leadership position there?
Yeah, I'm the managing director.
Okay, perfect. Because the next question I want to ask you is, what does leading mean for you, or what does leadership mean to you?
Hmm. I think like the first thing that comes to mind when you ask me that is something about like softness and actually leading with heart. Because when I think about what bad leadership is to me, it's more like dictating and I don't know. I think it's something about being able to connect to your heart, show empathy, and think about like the bigger picture and the longer road to the goal you're trying to achieve. Like leading with compassion and trying to inspire people to want to be part of something with you,
Mm,
which can take longer. And I think that's why some like managers less people in leadership positions tend to take the other approach. But yeah, that for me is like something to at least aspire to, because the dream would be that people just want to be part of what you're doing and yeah, and work with you and help you create something because they believe in you and what you're trying to create.
yeah. All right. Then we are getting closer to the end of uh, this podcast. And now you're back in Denmark after having been, yeah, lived many places, been around. What's next for you?
Um, I'm going to Iceland Airwaves.
Yeah.
Always nice going back home for a showcase festival, and yeah, that's always great fun because it's kind of like a reunion of everyone you know in the music industry that just comes and goes to shows together and talks business and talks about nonsense, and it will be cold, but it will be fun.
Mm. And are you just going as an festival attendee, or do you have something more to do with it this time?
Yeah, I usually always have something going on. This year I'm doing a panel and two of
Yeah.
my artists are playing for the first time. They're not Icelandic, so that's fun or one of them is not Icelandic, so it's nice to like bring something else back home.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exciting. All right. Well, then good trip to Iceland, and thank you so much for taking your time to talk to us and tell us a little bit about your work in the music industry.
Of course. Thank you.
Thank you.